This announcement that we made is worth much more than just the tariff side of it. The tariffs are obviously a piece of it as we're reacting to the new dynamic that's going to be out there. And it'll offset a good bit of it. So we'll move about 300,000 units of production.
GM's most dependable trucks are leaving families powerless in traffic. And nobody warned you. Engines are failing under 30,000 miles. Highways are turning into danger zones. And the brand that sold loyalty through glossy ads is now facing lawsuits, angry dealerships, and furious drivers. How many families will be left stranded? How many more crashes will it take? And what happens when even lifelong loyalists start walking away? Because by the end of this video, you'll see this scandal doesn't just hit GM, it hits every driver who thought trust still mattered. What's happening? For generations, a pickup in the driveway meant something more than just transportation. It symbolized toughness, dependability, and family pride. In towns across America, a Silverado or Sierra parked at the curb was treated like a badge of honor, proof that hard work and American steel still went hand in hand. That trust carried weight. Buyers believed General Motors when it told them these trucks were built to last a lifetime. That belief has now collapsed, and the sound of engines seizing on highways is the sound of that trust rupturing forever. The recall that landed in early spring shook nearly 600,000 families across the United States. Models from the Chevrolet Silverado 1500 to the Cadillac Escalade were suddenly flagged as potential hazards. The defect was not cosmetic. Engines in these trucks could seize without warning, cutting power at highway speeds, killing steering assist, and leaving drivers stranded with 18-wheelers closing in behind them. Federal regulators confirmed that even new vehicles with fewer than 30,000 miles could suffer catastrophic failures. This was not just another recall, it was cultural vandalism. It took the most trusted symbol in American driveways and revealed it as a rolling time bomb. The bond between drivers and their trucks, forged over decades of promises, shattered in an instant. But the so-called remedy made drivers' jaws drop. The oil cap fix. When the details of the official fix were revealed, owners were stunned. Instead of redesigning flawed components or replacing engines, General Motors told dealers to drain the factory-filled 0W20 oil, replace it with thicker 0W40, and attach a new filler cap marked with the updated viscosity. That was it. Families who had just been told their vehicles could lock up on the freeway were handed a jug of thicker oil and a cap with fresh lettering. It felt less like a repair and more like a magician's distraction. On paper, the explanation sounded technical. Thicker oil creates a stronger film between metal parts, delaying wear and bearing collapse. Yet any mechanic will tell you that once machining debris is circulating through an engine block, no grade of oil can save it. At best, the change buys time. At worst, it masks the defect long enough for the warranty to expire, leaving the owner stuck with a repair bill that runs into thousands of dollars. The insult stung even harder when drivers realized they had been sold on fuel economy claims built around the thinner oil. Switching viscosities meant sacrificing efficiency, undermining the very ratings splashed across glossy brochures. What was promised as best-in-class mileage now looked like a bait-and-switch engineered to keep costs down. And the numbers exposed how hollow that patch really was. If you're shocked by how deep this goes, hit the subscribe button right now and drop your experience in the comments, because your story might be the next truth we uncover. The numbers don't blink. Federal data stripped away the last excuses. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration logged more than 40 complaints of sudden engine failure, including at least a dozen crashes and confirmed injuries. Each report described the same terrifying moment. The truck loses all propulsion without warning, leaving drivers powerless to steer clear of danger. When investigators lined up these accounts, the pattern was undeniable. In January, regulators opened a preliminary evaluation covering roughly 877,000 vehicles. By April, that probe escalated into a formal engineering analysis, and General Motors was forced to issue a massive recall. Stop-sale orders landed at dealerships. Buyers waiting on new trucks were told deliveries were frozen indefinitely. On one side of the ledger stood glossy awards proclaiming most dependable. On the other side stood raw federal statistics and real families recovering from roadside crashes. The contrast was blinding. To owners, the scoreboard was simple. General Motors had spent years buying trophies and airing commercials while ignoring the cold numbers piling up at safety agencies. The spotlight was no longer flattering. It revealed a company that had gambled with lives and lost. But when the evidence hit the courtroom, the mask was torn off. The courtroom pattern. Long before this recall exploded, General Motors had already faced judges and juries over another engine scandal. In 2022, a class action exposed how piston ring designs in V8 engines led to chronic oil consumption. Internal documents showed engineers had flagged the defect, warning that engines could burn a quart every 1,000 miles. Instead of authorizing a costly redesign, management approved a cheaper cleaning process and hoped the failures would surface only after warranties expired. That gamble backfired when the jury sided with owners, awarding damages worth hundreds of millions of dollars. That verdict set a precedent. It proved that inside General Motors, the pattern was consistent. Identify a flaw, weigh the cost of redesign, and choose the cheaper patch. Customers became unwilling participants in a corporate experiment where reliability was secondary to quarterly profits. In court, no commercial could hide the memos, the bulletins, and the warnings ignored. Now, with nearly 900,000 trucks recalled for sudden engine seizures, that history looms large. To many, the recall is not an isolated event. It is the latest hand in a long game of cards, where executives keep their bonuses and drivers shoulder the risk. The jury, once again, may become the referee who decides how deep the deception ran. To see the truth, you have to open the engine block itself. Microns that maim. The scandal becomes even more disturbing when you shrink the lens down to the microscopic level. Engines are not destroyed by grand explosions, but by flaws measured in thousandths of an inch. A crankshaft surface polished just slightly too rough, or a connecting rod ground a hair too wide, can tear through the protective oil film that keeps metal gliding. Once that invisible barrier collapses, the result is not gradual wear, but sudden catastrophe. It is like sending an ice skate across sandpaper. Friction turns smooth motion into grinding destruction. Independent mechanics who tore down failed engines reported the same grisly picture: scored bearings, glittering metallic debris in oil pans, and journals scarred as though sand had been poured directly into the block. These were not trucks with 200,000 miles on the odometer. Some had barely 30,000, still wearing dealer stickers when they locked up on the highway. The flaw was invisible to the naked eye, but devastating in practice. Drivers never signed up for a game of microscopic roulette. They expected a Silverado or Sierra to run faithfully, not to conceal an invisible crack waiting to shatter trust. The deeper you look, the clearer it becomes. The destruction was baked into the machining process itself. Yet Corvette engines from the same family never shared this fate. The Corvette contrast. It is one of the cruelest ironies in the entire saga. The Chevrolet Corvette, a sports car designed to be flogged at 6,000 revolutions per minute, shares its bloodline with the very truck engines seizing at ordinary speeds. But while Silverado owners faced the nightmare of seized bearings, Corvette drivers enjoyed bulletproof performance. The difference was not luck, it was corporate choice. Engineers building the LT2 Corvette motor treated reliability as sacred. They specified forged steel connecting rods, high-grade alloy crankshafts, and a dry sump lubrication system with multiple pumps to guarantee constant oil flow, even under racing loads. They knew their customers would push cars to the red line, and they built accordingly. Truck buyers, however, were handed lower-grade materials, looser tolerances, and a lubrication system that could not withstand microscopic imperfections. This contrast proves the company knows how to build indestructible small-block V8s. It already had the metallurgy, the machining precision, and the institutional knowledge. But in trucks, the design calculus was different. Corvette customers paid for excellence. Truck buyers, many of them families and small businesses, were treated like cost-cutting experiments. The same corporate hand that forged a racehorse left pickup owners with a plow horse prone to collapse. That split decision revealed the truth. Follow the money, and the strategy becomes unmistakable. The warranty clock. When you pull back from the engineering bench and examine the business model, a disturbing pattern emerges. General Motors did not simply patch flaws, it timed them. By telling dealers to pour in heavier oil, the company effectively shifted the risk beyond the warranty horizon. Thicker viscosity could stretch engine life another 10 or 20,000 miles. Enough, perhaps, to ensure that catastrophic failures landed squarely on the shoulders of owners, rather than the balance sheet in Detroit. Internal documents from earlier lawsuits revealed this philosophy in action. Executives openly weighed the cost of a full redesign against the cheaper option of mitigation. If a Band-Aid could push failures past 60,000 miles, it was deemed acceptable. Investors applauded lower immediate expenses, even if it meant thousands of families would face five-figure repair bills later. The strategy resembled an hourglass flipped on its side, grains of sand sliding just slowly enough to keep warranties intact. But the clock always ran out. For drivers, the stakes were not abstract spreadsheets, but real survival on the road. For the company, it was about stretching dollars and reporting cleaner quarterly earnings. And while accountants watched the clock, marketers polished the trophies. Trophies versus tow trucks. For years, commercials flooded television screens with Silverado and Sierra trucks conquering mountains, towing horse trailers, and racking up gleaming awards. Phrases like most dependable and longest lasting were repeated until they felt like gospel. But the shine of trophies was a stage prop, built on contests where a glitchy infotainment system counted the same as a seized engine. In those rankings, statistical quirks mattered more than real-world dependability. In 2019, Chevrolet was even forced to pull an advertisement claiming superiority over Ford and Toyota after watchdogs challenged its interpretation of survey data. The gap between perception and reality widened further in the years that followed. While families dealt with breakdowns, glossy brochures bragged about reliability crowns. It was smoke and mirrors, a hollow crown sitting atop a collapsing empire. Owners saw the difference in the harshest way possible. Their award-winning trucks sat stranded on highways or trapped in dealership service bays, while television commercials declared them champions. Nothing erodes trust faster than watching stage props crumble against lived experience. Even longtime loyalists, the kind who defended the brand through past missteps, began to lose patience. For them, watching friends and neighbors suffer breakdowns while commercials bragged about reliability was the final straw. When die-hard supporters turn into critics, it signals a rupture that advertising dollars can never repair. But the real battle was not in ads. It was in dealerships overrun by chaos. Service bays became battlegrounds. When the recall detonated, the blast zone was not in corporate boardrooms, but in local dealerships. Service bays became trenches, where angry owners clashed with technicians who had no real weapons to fight with. Phones rang off the hook as Silverado and Sierra drivers demanded answers. Mechanics who usually handled brake jobs or tire rotations suddenly faced seized engines, furious families, and repair instructions that amounted to nothing more than an oil change and a sticker. The firestorm was relentless. Stop-sale orders froze trucks on lots. Dealers who had counted on spring deliveries to keep cash flow alive watched rows of unsold pickups gather dust. Families expecting new vehicles were told their orders were delayed indefinitely. Customers walked into showrooms waving recall notices, accusing sales staff of knowingly selling defective machines. In reality, most dealership employees were blindsided, just like their customers. They followed the official service bulletins, but when pressed, they admitted there was no genuine fix in hand. Every conversation was a battle. Promises made in television ads clashed with the reality of seized engines in the service bay. The dealership floor, once a place of community, became a front line where loyalty bled out with every argument. The frustration spilled far beyond individual service counters. Social media filled with videos of stranded trucks and angry customers confronting dealerships, each clip going viral and stoking nationwide outrage. What once looked like isolated complaints now appeared as a united chorus, amplifying the sense that GM had betrayed everyone. Then Washington's investigators turned up the heat. When Washington knocks, it only took a handful of reports to trigger the federal machinery. Around 40 detailed complaints of sudden engine failure reached the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration before regulators opened a preliminary evaluation. That was in January, and by April, the probe had already escalated into a full engineering analysis. Nearly 900,000 trucks and SUVs fell under the spotlight. The speed of escalation was stunning. Regulators had seen enough to treat this not as a nuisance, but as a systemic danger. The legal framing was chilling. Documents described the defect as a loss of propulsion, sterile words that hid the terror of an engine locking solid at 65 miles per hour. Federal engineers compiled crash data, pored over service bulletins, and confirmed that defects traced back to machining processes at specific plants. What began as a quiet review became a storm front of subpoenas, demands, and technical interrogations. For General Motors, there was no escape. Regulators demanded answers, and every vague reply only sharpened suspicion. The floodlights were on, the gavels ready, and the company's credibility was on trial before any courtroom opened its doors. Public trust in regulators was also on the line. After past scandals in the auto industry, many drivers doubted whether Washington would truly hold General Motors accountable. Each new disclosure became a test of credibility, not just for Detroit, but for the agencies sworn to protect the driving public. But lawyers and investors could hit GM even harder than regulators. The billion-dollar math. Every mechanical scandal eventually becomes a financial equation, and this one came with more zeros than Detroit wanted to admit. Class action lawsuits multiplied within weeks of the recall announcement, each alleging not just negligence, but deliberate concealment of known defects. Whistleblower memos and internal documents emerged as exhibits, showing how management approved cosmetic patches instead of true engineering fixes. Courts were no longer debating accidents, they were weighing intent. Wall Street analysts reacted quickly. Profit forecasts were trimmed, and liability estimates ballooned into the billions. Investors who once applauded General Motors for keeping recall costs low now questioned whether those savings would be swallowed whole by jury verdicts. Shares dipped as the market calculated not only settlements, but also the long-term damage to brand trust. For a company built on selling hundreds of thousands of trucks each year, even a modest erosion of loyalty threatened the foundation of future revenue. The dominoes lined up: lawsuits, settlements, downgraded ratings, and shaken shareholders, each toppled into the next, creating an earthquake that rippled beyond balance sheets into boardrooms. For executives, the numbers on spreadsheets were terrifying. For families, the cost was already personal. Behind the numbers, the sense of betrayal deepened. Families saw their investments crumble, while investors debated percentages and forecasts. To owners, it felt like Wall Street was discussing collateral damage rather than livelihoods. That cold detachment only sharpened the anger, reminding everyone that balance sheets rarely capture human costs. Meanwhile, workers on the line carried a different burden. No more silence, labor's turn. On the factory floor, the scandal carried a weight that balance sheets could never capture. Line workers who took pride in assembling America's trucks found themselves building machines that might strand families on highways. Pride gave way to unease. Union representatives reported hushed debates in break rooms about whether workers should accept management's silence or demand independent oversight of engine quality. Whispers of resistance spread, even as official statements urged calm. For decades, bargaining focused on wages, pensions, and hours. Now, safety itself entered the conversation. Some workers admitted they no longer bragged about their jobs. Others confessed shame at watching trucks they built appear in news reports about breakdowns and lawsuits. The strain was not just technical, it was ethical. Putting together a machine you know could fail a neighbor's family weighs heavier than any production quota. Labor leaders began to see leverage. By framing safety as both a worker and consumer issue, unions positioned themselves as protectors of the public, not just employees. That shift threatened management in ways no strike ever had. Once workers stopped believing in the product, the entire assembly line trembled. Some workers began to talk openly about taking their concerns outside the factory walls, connecting with consumer groups and safety advocates. That kind of alliance between labor and the public had the potential to transform the scandal from an internal dispute into a national movement that management could not contain. And once trust cracked inside the factory, it shattered in the driveway. Broken trust, broken balance sheets. The cost of betrayal is not measured only in court settlements. It shows up in every driveway and every ledger. Owners paid twice for their trucks, once when they signed the contract, and again when the resale market punished them for trusting General Motors. Used car guides slashed trade-in values for affected V8 models, wiping thousands of dollars off family budgets. For small business owners who depended on their trucks as both transport and equity, that lost value was devastating. A vehicle that was supposed to help them grow their business suddenly became a liability dragging them down, Insurance companies added insult to injury. As claims piled up, actuaries adjusted risk tables, and premiums climbed for owners who had done nothing wrong. A family in Texas might see their monthly insurance payment rise, not because of their driving record, but because of defects hidden in Detroit boardrooms. It was financial punishment layered on top of emotional betrayal. The foundations cracked, wallets drained, and trust collapsed under the weight of corporate neglect. Once faith in the bad shattered, the consequences rippled far beyond individual households. Communities felt the shock in ways numbers could never capture. Pickup culture was built on trust, on the idea that a truck was both a tool and a legacy. When resale values collapsed, it was not just money lost, it was identity stripped away from families who had believed in GM. Competitors saw their opening and lunged. You've seen how trust collapsed and balance sheets cracked. Don't miss what comes next. Hit subscribe right now, because the next revelations will drop soon. And if you're not here, you'll be left behind in the dark. The conquest campaigns? In the fiercely competitive truck market, rival automakers wasted no time turning General Motors' stumble into an opportunity. Ford dealers rolled out conquest cash incentives, dangling thousands of dollars in discounts for anyone willing to trade in a Silverado or Sierra for an F-Series. Toyota leaned on its reputation for reliability, expanding certified pre-owned programs and offering extended warranties designed to lure nervous buyers away from Detroit. It was not subtle. Ads hammered home durability, safety, and peace of mind. Radio spots in the Midwest promised Ford buyers miles of confidence. Toyota sponsored community events, pitching themselves as the brand that still stood by families. Even in the electric space, the contrast sharpened. Ford pushed its F-150 Lightning as the future-ready option, while Toyota teased hybrid truck expansions. The message was clear. While General Motors scrambled to patch old V8s, its rivals were already writing the next chapter of truck innovation. Pickup loyalty is notoriously sticky, often passed down like a family heirloom. But scandals break habits. Once a household switches, it rarely looks back. That reality turned every conquest campaign into a dagger aimed at General Motors' heart. The assault was not just about stealing sales. It was about reshaping loyalty. Competitors knew that once families felt betrayed, they would not return easily. By offering reassurance, transparency, and better protections, Ford and Toyota were not simply winning customers for today. They were seizing entire generations of future truck buyers. But the political storm brewing in Washington could be even harsher. Policy, penalties, and the EV transition. Scandals attract politicians like lightning attract storm clouds. And this one was no different. Within weeks, congressional committees began drafting hearing proposals. Lawmakers from auto-heavy states demanded to know why defects identified years earlier were still rolling onto highways. Safety committees floated the idea of truth in advertising reforms, pointing to the absurd gap between most dependable slogans and seized engines. Insurance hikes became talking points for populist leaders, eager to frame the scandal as corporate greed punishing working families. The timing could not have been worse for General Motors. Washington was already debating how to manage the transition to electric vehicles, with billions of dollars in subsidies and industrial policy on the table. Now, the company that branded itself as a leader in electrification stood accused of cutting corners on its bread-and-butter trucks. Every hearing threatened to turn into a public flogging, with executives grilled under bright lights as angry constituents watched from home. The tectonic plates of policy were shifting. What began as a defect in bearings and crankshafts collided with national debates about safety, accountability, and the future of mobility itself. And beneath the surface, another pressure built. Consumer advocates argued that if automakers could mislead buyers about gasoline-powered trucks, what was stopping them from playing the same game with electric ranges, battery durability, or charging safety? That fear struck deep, reshaping debates about trust in the EV future. Yet in the end, the final power rests with one group. Drivers decide. When all the lawyers, regulators, and politicians finished their speeches, the real decision still belongs to the people who turned the keys. Drivers became the true regulators of General Motors' future. Advocacy groups urged owners to check their vehicle identification numbers against federal databases, to document every oil change, every unusual noise, and every trip to the dealership. Forums overflowed with advice on compression tests, bore scope inspections, and early warning signs of bearing failure. Owners shared stories, pooled resources, and pressured the company to extend warranties or buy back defective trucks. For many families, the truck was not just transportation, but their single most valuable asset. Protecting it became a matter of survival. In that struggle, the key in the ignition became a shield, and every driver's voice added weight to the demand for accountability. What regulators exposed and lawyers debated, communities amplified into a chorus too loud to ignore. The scandal stripped away illusions and left drivers standing as the final arbiters of truth. Their choices, whether to switch brands, demand buybacks, or hold on with suspicion, will shape the next era of the American truck market. The next set of leaked documents could change everything again. This isn't just a recall, it's a reckoning. Families, workers, and drivers are already paying the price, and the storm is far from over. Every week, new leaks pull the curtain back even further. And the next one could change everything again. Don't wait to hear it secondhand. Be here when the truth breaks. Subscribe now, share this with anyone who depends on their truck, and let's keep exposing what they'd rather you never see.